Democracy around the world is at risk, and the world is at a crossroads. We can either strengthen it and build a better world for our people, or we can continue to do things like we are. Democratic countries need to band together to support and share one another so that we will not be at the mercy of China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, North Korea, Iran, etc., who are building a partnership of hate and who rule their people through violation of their citizens' human rights. Countries who treat their women as if they're less than and have dominion over their lives and choices are not countries I am interested in having any relations. I do not believe in their control and won't reward them by enriching their countries. Having lived as a woman in a democratic country, I would not wish communism or authoritarian government on my daughter or anyone else's daughters, wives, mothers, sisters, aunts, or nieces. This plan is designed for democratic countries to build a network of job sharing, technology, healthcare, and security so that our future generations of women and girls will be safe and secure in a healthy country. By strengthening relationships between democratic countries, it will enable them to support one another without the fear of financial retribution, which is a notorious tactic of China's President Xi. If President Xi or his government find a comment or action offensive to their leader or government, they threaten and punish smaller countries with financial retaliation. This financial extortion is one of the reasons that I will not support working with the current government of China. There are many reasons why working with the current Chinese government, and this article spells out many of them. World Report 2024 Human Rights Watch. By limiting our partnerships to democratic countries, we lessen the ability for President Xi to retaliate to gain more global control. Instead of tiptoeing around the fact, use their strength and beliefs on other countries. This form of governing will also taint the intent of the system. 2017 to 2021. The Chinese Communist Party, threatening global peace and security. China's disregard for human rights, as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states, all people possess human rights and fundamental freedom that governments must protect. The government of the People's Republic of China, PRC, guided by a totalitarian ideology under the absolute rule of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, deprives citizens of their rights in a sweeping scale and systematically curtails freedoms as a way to retain power. People in China cannot practice the religion or belief of their choice. They cannot express their opinions openly or form or join groups of their choosing without fear of harassment, arrest, or retribution. Members of minority groups are subject to mass arbitrary detention, Orwellian-style surveillance, political indoctrination, torture, forced abortions and sterilization, and state-sponsored forced labor. Repression in Xinjiang. The PRC has taken its decade-long repressive policies in Xinjiang to the extreme since April 2017, detaining more than 1 million members of religious minority groups in internment camps in a systemic effort to eradicate their ethnic and cultural identity and religious beliefs and control their population growth. Countless publicly available reports of torture, rape, forced ingestion of drugs, sexual assault, and other horrific abuses occurring in these camps have been documented based on the experiences of those who have escaped. Outside the camps, the CCP's repression of the minorities includes coercion practice such as pervasive surveillance and involuntary mass collection of biometric data from innocent civilians, state-sponsored forced labor, and compulsory stays by CCP officials in Uyghur homes intended to prevent the observance of religious practices. Members of these minority groups are forcibly relocated to camps and factories and required to renounce their ethnic identities, religious beliefs, and cultural and religious practices. In addition, children are removed from their families and forced into state-run indoctrination facilities, and women and girls are routinely subjected to forced marriages and other abuses, including forced abortion, forced sterilization, and involuntary birth control implantation. Leaked government documents corroborate the coercive nature of these camps and the CCP's systemic campaign against these men, women, and children. Fear of arbitrary arrests. The CCP has absolute control over law enforcement and the judicial system, and it uses both to stifle calls from Chinese citizens for freedom, human rights, and the rule of law. Authorities regularly detain those who do not conform to the CCP's ideology. Those brave enough to speak out are often subject to prolonged and secret detention detention without access to legal counsel or the ability to communicate with their families. Lawyers, human rights activists, intellectuals, journalists, religious leaders, religious adherents, and ethnic and religious minorities are frequent targets, accused of vaguely worded charges that imply treason and subversion. These arrests and the fear they instill are tools in the CCP's effort to maintain unchallenged power over people. Religious freedom abuses. The PRC government is one of the worst abusers of religious freedom in the world and is openly hostile to members of all religious faiths, including Uyghur, Muslims, Tibetan Buddhists, Christians, and Falun Gong practitioners. The PRC has adopted a 5-year plan to bring all religious doctrine and practice in line with the Communist Party doctrine. This effort calls for rewriting holy texts, forbidding youth from participating in religious activities, and implementation of mass detention camps that indoctrinate detainees in the CCP's ideology and forced renunciation of their faith. Leaked PRC government documents show use of religious-related reasons, such as men wearing beards and women wearing veils, and families having too many children as justification to detain Uyghur Muslims and impose further ideological control on the Chinese population. The CCP has also insisted it has the authority to select Tibetan Buddhist lamas, including the next Dalai Lama, and considers house churches and Falun Gong adherents and their practices to be illegal if they refuse to join the CCP-led organizations or renounce important elements of their beliefs. Authorities routinely shutter or demolish homes of worship and offer cash rewards to those who inform on religious adherence. Individuals found violating the laws and regulations controlling religion are harassed, surveilled, interrogated, arrested, beaten, sentenced to prison, detained, or disappeared. Stifling freedom of expression. The PRC government strictly controls what information is available on the internet within China. Further, the PRC controls all domestic news reporting through direct ownership of news outlets. Daily CCP directives compelled Chinese media to report on specific issues and perspectives, ensuring that only information matching the government's desired narrative is shared. The government control of telecommunications infrastructure enables the blocking of websites and mass deletion of microblog posts, instant messages, and user accounts that touch on banned political, social, economic, and religious topics. Thousands of websites are blocked in China, including major news and social media hubs like Google, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. The Chinese people lack access to dissenting views, and the fear of severe punishment deters those who want to speak out, imposing a nationwide culture of self-censorship. Forced labor laws in China do not allow for freedom of association, which is a core labor standard. Independent unions are illegal in China, and employers are under no obligation to bargain with workers in good faith. The effects on workers are severe. Occupational safety and health violations are prevalent, with limited enforcement recourse for workers who find themselves in dangerous working conditions. Workers are frequently not paid in many industries. Workplace discrimination is rampant, including recruitment practices that explicitly reference gender, age, disability, physical appearance, and marital status. In the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, state-sponsored forced labor remains a significant part of the CCP's campaign of repression against Uyghurs and members of other Muslim minority groups. The PRC subsidizes Chinese companies to set up factories near detention camps in Xinjiang and transfers camp victims and others from rural areas to factories in other parts of Xinjiang and throughout China to work as forced labor under the guise of vocational training and poverty alleviation programs. Assault on Hong Kong's autonomy. In 1997, the PRC promised the people of Hong Kong at least 50 years of autonomy and a system in which they could choose their leaders. These promises are enshrined in Hong Kong's Basic Law and UN-registered Sino-British Joint Declaration. A mere 2 decades later, the CCP broke those promises. The government of Hong Kong has announced the postponement of legislative council elections for at least a year, enacted draconian national security legislation that provides for up to life in prison for the ambiguously defined crimes of secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign powers, and which lawmakers were forced to vote on without the ability to debate its provisions, and created new national security institutions with limited oversight that are designed to eliminate challenges to the PRC government, including peaceful protests. Authorities are removing books critical of the CCP from the bookstore and library shelves, banning democratic political slogans, and requiring schools to enforce censorship of teachers and students. What made Hong Kong flourish, freedom, is being destroyed and its autonomy eviscerated. Beijing's broken promises undermine the human rights, fundamental freedom, and dignity of the people of Hong Kong. Severe restrictions in Tibet. The PRC is continuing its decade-long campaign to eradicate Tibet's unique religious, ethnic, cultural, and linguistic identity. Tibetans live in a virtual police state and face severe restrictions of their human rights and fundamental freedom, including freedom of religion or belief. The PRC interferes in the selection, education, and veneration of Tibetan Buddhist religious leaders and has evicted thousands of monks and nuns from religious institutions while destroying their dwellings. The PRC government has refused repeated requests to hold a meaningful and direct dialogue with the Dalai Lama or his representatives without preconditions. Instead, it has cut off the Tibetan community from the rest of the world, including by systematically impeding access to the region for foreign diplomats, journalists, and tourists. These are just a few human rights violations and why an open, free will, worker-focused, human rights, dignity, and equality-based system won't work with the current Chinese government's philosophy of control, punishment, and domination, where human rights and equality are non-negotiable. We need to move us to a more earth and human rights conscious focused instead of global domination. By having our strict criteria for partnerships, we'll also give people who live in autocratic and communist countries hope for a more fair, equitable, and sustainable future option other than what they live in. By having a network of solid forever jobs will enable our leaders to promote our democratic way of life or speak up about human rights violations without being financially punished by a communist leader. This is my plan and these are my rules, and it was clear from the down that the structure of the system is non-negotiable. Any negative influence will change the outcome of the intent and goal, thereby going against the original mission. I don't want our future generations of girls and women to have their rights violently removed because of the whims of men determined to take over other democratic countries. We are now 3 years into Putin's war crimes against Ukraine, a sovereign nation who is fighting for their people, land, and future for no other reason than Putin wanted to commit genocide and take over Ukraine's land, resources, and next the rest of Europe. This article supports not working with Russia. March 2024. Ukraine, UN Commission concerned by continuing patterns of violations of human rights and international humanitarian law, Geneva. 2 years after the Russian Federation's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, civilian suffering is mounting as a result of Russia's disregard for basic principles in humanitarian law and its human rights obligations. The Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine said the commission found new evidence that Russian authorities have committed violations of international human rights and international humanitarian law and corresponding war crimes in areas that have come under control in Ukraine. New evidence strengthens the Commission's previous findings that torture against civilians by Russian authorities in Ukraine and in the Russian Federation have been widespread and systematic. Investigations found additional evidence concerning the unlawful transfer of children to areas under Russian control. The report documents incidents of rape and other sexual violence committed against women in circumstances which also amount to torture. It also details incidents of torture with sexualized dimension and threats of rape against male prisoners of war. So Putin's authoritarian regime and control of media and propaganda is not a country that this plan will work with. And so why only partner with democracies? In order to build the best world where all people are equal under the law means only working with similar-minded governed countries. Authoritarian and dictatorship governments do not have the same ethics, standards, and violate their citizens' human rights. And if we support this form of government, we also support their abuses of their people. By rewarding these countries, we will also be giving it permission to spread this hate around the world. By denying them entrance into our partnership brings light to their human rights violations, but also becomes a silent protest and supports their people by shining light on this abuse on a global scale. By not being able to be partners in the largest global movement because they are violating their citizens' human rights, these governments must answer to their people why they won't have a chance of good middle-class jobs in a thriving, economically strong country, supported by other democratic countries. At some point, all people in every country will want equality and sustainability, and GGDI and 7Gens will be there when they meet the criteria for partnerships. GGDI and 7Gens will not compromise our morals because this decision will make some people uncomfortable. In order to make an equal and just world, we must ensure that we live by the very morals that we want our new world to be for our children.